Has your shadow ever seemed off, like it was doing things of its own accord? That's how this whole terrifying ordeal began for me. Just an odd little observation that quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. It started small. I'd noticed my shadow lagging ever so slightly behind my movements, or seeming to contort itself into strange shapes when I wasn't looking directly at it. Silly little things that I brushed off at first. We all let our imagination run a little wild sometimes, right? But the peculiarities kept mounting. One morning, I awoke to find the shadow on my bedroom wall had shifted several feet to the left overnight, despite nothing in the room having been moved. Another time, I caught my shadow outside mimicking my motions a few seconds before I actually made them. Unnerving, to be sure, but I'm a pretty level-headed person. I figured there had to be some logical explanation. Trick of the light, my mind playing tricks on me, something like that. I did my best to ignore the weirdness. That is, until the night I was woken by a sound. A sort of screeching noise, like something was scrabbling across the hardwood floor of my bedroom. I lay motionless, ears straining, when a shape began to coalesce in the shadows cast by the street light filtering through my curtains. It looked like a shadow made solid and three-dimensional. It slung across the floor, an inky, vaguely humanoid figure. As it neared the bed, I could make out spindly limbs and a head that seemed to constantly shift between different nightmarish visages. My heart was thundering in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, but some primal part of my brain kept me frozen in place, not wanting to draw this thing's attention. It crept steadily closer until it loomed over me, an unseen force pressing down on my body, making it hard to breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the shadowy apparition was gone, melting back into the darkness as if it had never been there at all. I must have finally passed out from sheer terror, because the next thing I knew, daylight was streaming through the windows. Part of me wanted desperately to believe I'd merely had an extremely vivid nightmare, but the lingering sense of dread, the feeling that something had intruded into my safe haven, told me otherwise. I kept replaying that chilling encounter in my mind, analyzing every disturbing detail. Over the next few days, I became withdrawn, jumpy. I stopped going out after dark, blinds and curtains drawn tight shut. I slept with all the lights on, if I slept at all. It didn't matter. That thing always eventually returned. Sometimes it would simply observe me from across the room, an oppressive presence waning on my mind. Other times, it took on more disturbing forms, a shapeless amoeba oozing across the ceiling, spindly appendages sprouting from surfaces and grasping at me. That same hooded, faceless silhouette from my first encounter materializing in the corner of my vision. I began documenting everything, taking photos and videos in a frantic attempt to prove to myself I wasn't losing my grip on reality. But the footage never showed anything out of the ordinary. Just empty rooms, shadows behaving as they should. It was slowly driving me mad. My desperate research led me down a peculiar path, into the occult, ancient folklore and legends. Story after story framed shadowy entities that attached themselves to individuals, tormenting and driving their victims insane over time. The more I read, the more certainties took shape in my mind. This thing that haunted me was no mere shadow, but something that existed in the space between the real and the unreal. A demon, for lack of a better word, that fed off fear and anguish. It clung to me like a parasite, gaining strength from my escalating terror. And it had chosen me as its latest prey. But why? What have I done to open myself up to this malevolent force? I racked my brain but came up empty. Perhaps there was no grand reason. I'd simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. With this realization came a small shred of hope. These legends spoke of ways to confront such forces, to banish them from our plane of existence. If I could uncover and follow the correct rituals, I might be able to free myself from this waking nightmare once and for all. Finally, I started the ritual as the shadowy form took shape. The demonic entity raged, striking me with barbed tendrils that caused deep, painful cuts. Despite the agony, I persisted, concentrating fully on completing the spell. As I was weakening, a bright flash of energy burst out. I shielded my eyes. When I could see again, the shadow creature was floating in the air, thrashing around as it faded into nothing. An oppressive weight lifted from both my home and my very soul. The malignant presence I'd been tormented by for so long was no more. I had won. I was free. For weeks and months, there was no sign of that malevolent entity. I resumed my normal life, going out at night without fear of shadows. I even started healing from the trauma. But then, it started again.